Name is host Eric, and I am the host of Talking with Famous People. I'm here with famous persons Ellie, Nandi, and not host Mark. And we are going to discuss Claudia's question, which she sent me by the Talking with Famous People Facebook page, which you're welcome to do. I do check there periodically. I mean, every day pretty much. And I check it more than my YouTube messages, that's for sure. Anyway, the topic is honor. Honor and whether it is related to specific cognitive functions, and if so, which ones. So I think to tackle this issue, we first have to somewhat describe honor or narrow down what it is. I would say that honorable behavior is behavior that is attentive to a moral code, even when, and especially when, there's no way you could get caught breaking it. Anybody else want to throw in other possibilities to add to the definition of honor?
When there's no way you can get caught breaking it? Do you want to explain that?
Right, well, we could say you honor a commitment means to follow through on it. But if you're on the honor code, that means we're trusting you to do it without having any enforcement mechanism, right?
Right.
So that's why I think honorable implies that you're going to do the right thing for the right reasons, even if you would 100% be sure that you could get away with doing the wrong thing. And nobody would ever find out.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay, so this is an interesting question because there was this story that I used to read with the middle schoolers back when I taught English, and it was a story about two boys at a private military school that was like super hardcore and had this honor code, and one of the boys had already failed this one Latin class like twice or something, and he really wanted to pass his time, and he ended up cheating on the test, and one of his friends caught him. But as part of the honor code was that if you catch anybody else breaking the honor code, you have to turn them in. Now, that to me seems like not very honorable. That's a different kind of thing, right? It's not the same thing as adhering to the code yourself. Being honor bound to turn somebody else in for breaking the honor code, I don't think that could be declared honorably required. Anyway, regardless, in the story, the guy did turn him in, and at the end, the kid got kicked out of school, and he had to go to a different school, and it was sort of, I don't know if there was a moral to the story or what, but regardless, most people would tend to agree that people ought to behave honorably to the extent that they can. And by that means adhere to, in general, a code of behavior that is based upon respect, kindness, decency, honesty, stuff like that. So the question then of what cognitive function it comes from is an interesting one, because it would seem to be a TI solution to a TE complication, right? Like an honor code anyway. Well, let's not have a formal set of rules. Except this particular honor code that I was referring to in the story was very formalized. It was more like a TE version of a TI version of a TE idea. Like, okay, well, TE goes, let's make a super complicated and firm set of rules. And TI goes, no, let's have an honor code. And then TE goes, okay, but let's write it out so it's like a complicated set of rules. But I think Claudia's hypothesis was that it was FI or FE. Is FI really a thing behind that? I'm sorry, go ahead.
I would agree with that. I think it'd be a feeling function, not a thinking function.
Okay. Why?
I'd have to think about that for a minute to give you a good answer. I mean, I don't really see the logic in it. I mean, it has to be in some way a form of empathy or a form of self-worth that I don't think you would get through a thinking function. If that makes sense.
Well, for me, there's lots of behaviors that I avoid because I know it's going to make too many metaphysical complications for me. You know? Like, granted, very few of those things are in this weird, unique circumstance where you know 100% certain that you're not going to get caught and you could do it. But for me, it would still create too many metaphysical complications, and I would know that. It would be like, okay, well, even if I so-called know for sure that I'm not going to get caught, it's not really possible to know for sure because it's still in the future. So I'm going to worry. I'm going to, if I feel like I'm doing something wrong, then on moral grounds, then I'm not probably going to want to do it at all. Just because I just like consistency, I guess. I don't want to have to. I don't want to have that conversation with myself later, you know?
So for
I
this
guess
honor code,
Go ahead.
is this
Ellie.
more about the people that, is it more about the people that talk about it, like the military people, or are we including people that might not refer to an honor code but just do the right thing?
Well, I think honor means. I use the honor code just as an example. I'm talking about honor in general, like, honoring somebody's request. In a sense of like they say to you, "Hey, listen, don't tell anybody about this, but I need to ask you a question because I'm kind of embarrassed about it." Well, you do the honorable thing. You don't tell anybody, even if you know you could get away with it. So it's like, oh, well, this other person's never going to meet that person. I could tell him about it, and they don't even know each other and will never cross paths. You still don't tell that person about it because you took the information on trust. It's like they gave it to you. When they communicated with you in the first place, they said to you, "Hey, can I tell you something? But I don't want you to tell anybody." And usually I'll tell them. It depends who it is, I guess. But I mean, my reaction to that is, well, I will. It depends what it is, sort of. If it's not
Right.
very important, I might slip up and tell somebody. But that's being honorable too. At least announcing ahead of time that you're a little bit iffy in this area or something. Trying to make it fair. That's what honorable is. Trying to make shit fair.
Well, what if it is really important? He comes up to you and he says, "Oh, I killed this guy, Bob." It wouldn't be an honorable thing not to tell anybody.
Correct. And I would, in that case, prioritize utilitarian concerns. I'm not a straight-up deontologist. I don't think that you should never lie. I don't think you should never go back on a promise. If I said to him, "Yeah, I won't tell anybody," and he says, I killed the whole family. I didn't mean to, but I just kept stabbing and stabbing. I'd say, "Oh, I'm really sorry to hear that. Yeah, I'm not going to tell anybody. Don't worry about it." And then I go straight to the cops. Then
honorable doesn't have to do with the person themselves or honoring the person's request. It has to do with upholding some sort of objective truth, objective morality that exists.
Well, I mean, I think the honorable thing to do is to recognize that the honor-based duty to turn in a murderer outweighs any honor-based duty to keep your word to that murderer, unless you are designated an individual for whom that honor-based duty to keep confidentiality is considered your primary duty, like a priest. In which case, that priest he cannot behave honorably and reveal somebody's confession, no matter what, in my opinion, because they're claiming to be representing a higher morality, and I'm not saying they are. I'm saying they're claiming to, so they can't possibly justify revealing confidences.
Right. I mean, my argument would be that we're all supposed to be doing that, not just a priest, but each one of us.
We're all supposed to be doing what? Following a higher morality?
Right. I mean, you'd have to.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's necessary to follow a higher morality. I think human morality is fine. We just have to follow it correctly. You know, it doesn't.
Yeah, but then you have to ask where that human morality came from. It didn't just come up from some guy, coming up with it.
It all follows logically from the fact that you're born owning your own body, and reciprocal burdens.
I mean, right, but you'd prove that your body is your own and not someone else's. Or your
Okay.
body is different from the reality outside of you. I mean, those are all basic questions that you
Okay,
need to
but
figure out.
hey, here's the thing. This is people always want to go there, but you can't even establish that you own your own body. I say to them the simple fact that you're not considering that the default position is that or the alternative. The alternative is somebody else does own your body. So we base morality on the fact that you own your own body because, where are natural rights come from? Why do we have a natural right for free expression? It's because you're born screaming, and the only way to shut you up is to transgress upon you. You can't convince you to shut up. It's only transgression. So, if we want to live in a world where it's not okay to smother babies because they're crying too much, then we acknowledge right off the bat that you own your own body. And that body is conferred that your ownership of that body confers duties upon other people not to transgress upon it. I mean, that's the thing. We want to pretend as though we can talk about these things with an alternative of nothing, but that's never the case. Either you own your own body or you don't. If you don't, either it's not an ownable thing, in which case, then in no sense can you be said to be responsible for your own behavior, because we understand responsibility entirely through ownership. If I crash into you with my car and it's my fault, then I'm responsible to pay you for that, or my insurances or whatever, because I have to take liability for my own behavior and the behavior of my property.
I mean, I agree, but it's still something you have to establish. You can't just say that, well, if we didn't have this, we couldn't function in this better way that we can right now, that we agree when we agree upon that. But it's still something I say that you have to establish.
But I mean, all people of all time have always agreed that people are born owning their own body. They either agree with it because they try to stay free, or they agree with it because they try to put claim upon that body and claim ownership over it, which makes it, of course, necessarily ownable.
I think, therefore I am. I mean, that whole statement was due to the fact that he didn't know if the outside world was there. It's an existential question that you need to establish. I mean, when you go through.
Okay, wait, hold on.
The
necessary, but listen, you're doing something called necessary but insufficient burdens. You're assigning a bunch of necessary but insufficient burdens. You need to establish this and this and this and this and this and this and this before you can make a basic claim that you own your own body. I don't need to establish any of those things because the alternative is existent. Maybe myriad alternatives. But until you can establish one of those alternatives as preferable, then I have established it, because you don't get to have default nothing.
I mean, what do you mean you don't get to have default nothing?
I mean, if you say you haven't established that you are born owning your own body, I say we behave as though we are born owning our own body, and I would point out the fact that if not that, what alternative? And if you don't have any possible alternative, then it must be that. If you have some possible alternatives that I can show are not accurate, then it must be that. We do know that we ascribe ownership to things. We do know that things have ownership status, and we do know that bodies are things.
I would say that we need to be told that we can't just come up with that on our own.
We don't have to know it a priori for it to be true.
I think think you need to be told. I think it needs to be stated.
I did state it.
Well, not a person. I mean, I would say a God would have to state that, which you did.
Why? Why?
But I don't think without that, then I don't think you can begin.
Why not? What alternative do you have to self-ownership?
Of self-ownership, I have no way of determining that the outside world is different than I am.
Well, I mean, you didn't come up with these ideas, did you? Did you know them before I said them?
What ideas?
The ideas that I've just been saying to you. If I said to you the following joke, what do you get when you cross Barbra Streisand with a grizzly bear? Do you know the answer?
I don't know the answer.
Then there must be stuff outside of the world, because I know the answer. And if it was in you, you'd already know it, or at least have access to it. Now, the answer is, of course, Yentl Ben. Yentl Ben is the answer. Now you know. Now it's inside of you. Now it is. Used to not be. But the point is, you could choose to fall all the way back into skep regarding existence, but no meaningful conversations are had there.
I agree with you.
Because to say that you're not sure if we exist is to misunderstand that existence is part of the definition of consciousness. So the thing that we're doing right now, whether we are being or not, the thing that we're doing is being.
Right. So I totally agree with you. I would just say that you need to establish some ground to stand on first. I mean, if you can't just say, well, this is nice. I'm gonna float here. You got to be standing on something.
Well, I mean, I think I established enough to establish self-ownership, and then, in fact, I know I did because you collapsed all the way back down to skepticism. Otherwise, you would have gone up instead of down.
You got to start at the beginning.
No, you don't. What justifies your necessary but insufficient burden? You haven't warranted it at all. I've warranted my claims. Why do I have this necessary but insufficient burden to start all the way at the beginning? To first prove existence before I can establish anything else. I mean, if I say we should go to that store because it's cheaper, do I have to first prove we exist before you agree with me? I don't know, Eric. I'm not sure we exist yet. No.
Well, if you're talking about something as big of a question as what is honor, I think you do. That's a very deep question.
Well, I think there's just as much depth to the question of which grocery store is cheaper and why we ought to prioritize that or not, and what it tells us about the nature of wealth and our endeavors. How, as human beings, we have the capacity to make fungible our ability to get others to do things.
I would agree with you that you would have to start at the beginning to determine what store is cheaper. But I mean that would be a different conversation.
Would you have to start with existence, though?
Oh, with everything, absolutely. You really do.
So before you go to the movies, you have to reestablish that you exist before choosing a movie. I don't have to
reestablish it. I've already established it. I don't have to reestablish it. But I mean, we haven't talked about this before, so yeah, and we have to establish that.
Okay, fine. All right, cool. I like your style. We do exist, or let's talk for the purposes of this argument as though we do. So, have you come up with anything to counter my born owning your own body thing? Not my argument, by the way. It's not like I'm making up these arguments myself.
Oh, no, I understand. I agree with you.
Okay, so then that's why I don't think we need God to provide a morality. Although it's nice to have him there. You can have him there too. You don't have to. He's not exclusive of atheism. Belief in God is not exclusive of atheism. It totally isn't. It's just because they happen at different times. It depends on your mood, you know? It depends on what you're trying to do.
Well, what do you mean? It depends on what you're trying to do?
Yeah. Believing in God is a behavior. It's not a thing in your head, not an object in your head. So you choose to believe, you choose to engage in faith-based, faith-driven behaviors, You can call it God, or you can call it whatever you want to call it. I don't know, Steve or something. And you say, oh, well, my faith-based behavior is to assume that Steve has something in mind for me right now. That the reason I forgot my wallet was because I'm supposed to go to a different place or something like that. You know, I mean, and then I'm always looking for things that I'm intended to do instead of just shit that happens, right? Like, what am I intended to learn from this? What am I intended to make happen? And
well, that's a whole nother discussion. And that discussion is a Calvinist argument versus an Arminian argument versus a
but it's not an
open
argument.
theist argument.
That's my point. It's not an argument. It's a behavior.
Well, I mean, right, but that behavior would be consistent upon what you ascribe to. And
I don't need to affirm any position statement to engage in a behavior.
I guess I don't understand.
Well, what I'm saying is, why can't I practice faith stuff without believing in God?
Why can you or why can't you?
Why can't I?
What is faith-based stuff? I don't think
faith-based stuff is that sort of magical
whatever.
thinking I'm just talking about. That the big guy, the universe, some external observer has a destiny in mind for me, and he's giving me hints as to what I ought to do.
Okay.
Why does that require me to believe in anything?
Believe in what you just stated, or believe in what?
I mean, why do I have to believe anything to engage in that behavior? To frame things like that and say, well, if it were the case. Now, I don't usually have the if on there, the conditional, because I understand that I'm not stuck. I'm not going to get stuck, right? I used to be afraid of this. That, like, if you tried to have faith, you'd get stuck and you wouldn't be able to stop. It's ridiculous. It's just something you do. It's a little trick you use. Religious people have these tricks. They use them. And we don't have access to them because we think we're too good for them or something. They're powerful. And they don't require any belief. Just in the moment. You've got to behave as though you believe.
Illogical.
You have to behave as though you believe. You have to.
Right, it'd be illogical.
It would be illogical?
Yeah. I mean, well, you'd be
what's
believing
illogical
for what?
about what's illogical about utilizing an effective mechanism to accomplish aims?
Well, I mean, you have to establish why you're using it.
To establish, I already did. Okay, well, here's one reason. Because personally, my individual self has lower ambitions for me than my abstracted out external observer. So it empowers me to embrace
Yeah, so it's for a purpose.
God scale destinies.
Yeah, so you're giving yourself a meaningless purpose. Is an existentialist argument. Or
It's not an
existentialist
argument.
decision.
It's not an argument or a decision. It's a behavior.
It's an existentialist behavior.
It doesn't matter what label you put on it. It's a behavior. And my point is, it's a behavior that produces good outcomes. There's a reason for it, because it changes the way you frame your experience such that you are seeking opportunities and seeking meaning to enrich and empower you. But you got to actually practice the behavior. So, my whole point is that it's not an existentialist argument. It's not a theistic argument. It's not any kind of argument. It's a trick. It's a trick you can use.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's a trick you can use, sure.
I mean, Ellie, what tricks do I mean? I mean the trick of walking around and framing things through this begging the question model. So you're saying, okay, this seems like it might mean something. I wonder what it could mean. And then you're immediately in the frame of thinking about where you're going, where opportunities are, how you can take advantage of things, how you can profit off of circumstances, how you can spot the right person for the right position that you're looking for, stuff like that. And of course, when you're walking around framing things like that, that's what you get. And so, I mean, sometimes you got to go back later and beg the question and say, oh, well, see, I thought it meant that, but it actually meant this other thing over here. And then a logical person would say, well, then your mechanism is garbage, Eric. And I say, okay, you just keep on keep on procrastinating there, bud. Yeah, what else is there to say?
Maybe this has something to do with the NE and TI flip-flop or something like that.
Maybe. I mean, the point is, proof's in the pudding. At the end of the day, I'm more effective for doing that. It makes me more effective. It makes me more effective because it liberates me from some of the possibility wrestling that normally goes along with the ENTP most of the time. Like, can't decide between shit, you know? If you got things positioned to, like, place them in larger narratives that already have some structure to them, and that you've got sort of linear directionalities, various sort of seeds kind of going in different directions, then, you know, it allows you to tidy up your identity in some ways. It forces you to tidy it up because you're no longer could be anything. You're now, well, I'm on some kind of a destiny. I may not know exactly what it is, but I'm going to accept that fact because the alternative is that there's nothing to compare it to. There's no standard to compare against. How do you know?
Well, I mean, we agree. I mean, I do think it's beneficial. I do think it gives you a purpose. I just don't think you should just accept it as that. You know, like you should try to understand why it's doing that, or like what the underflow is.
So you think I'm insufficiently meted up on this? Is that what you're telling me?
I guess so. Yeah.
Okay. Any other thoughts on this notion of magical thinking and everything happens for a reason? Did anybody else? I used to fight my ex-wife about it. She'd say that to me all the time. When she'd say that, and I'd say that's the most ridiculous sentence I've ever heard in my life. Candace, everything happens for a reason. It doesn't mean anything, and even if it's sort of, I guess, a little true, you don't mean it the right way. I would say that to her, but then when I quit drinking, I came to understand the power of having in my arsenal non-rational weapons, and henceforth I've been happily utilizing both to befuddle people. Nandi, do you think everything happens for a reason?
I don't know. I'm not really sure how I feel about all that.
Ellie, how about you? You think everything happens for a reason?
Some things happen for a reason. Not everything's planned.
Okay. Do you think anybody else in here think they have a destiny besides me? Lorenz Walker, is your destiny to be the most pretentious thick rib in town? Maybe Lorenz Walker is busy playing League of Legends right now. No, I think everything happens for no reason. No, I think everything happens for no reason. Everything happens for no reason? So, if I light this on fire, the cigarette just lit for no reason? Oh my god, it's lit. Why?
There are philosophers that would argue.
Well,
You're not seeing causality. You're only seeing the after effect of you lighting the lighter and then the cigarette being on fire.
Well, even though I'm not seeing causality, though, I'm proving conditionality because I can set it up
You're proving
as a conditional.
Conditionality, but you're not proving causality.
I don't need to prove causality. I'm a time person. I don't like causality. Causality is for space objects. Any other thoughts on magical thinking? Nobody else wants to join me on the Believe Random Shit Express? Takes you straight to heaven. And you know what? In my way, you get to make heaven however you want. So, mine's going to be constantly changing.
Yeah, if it doesn't work like that,
In my metaphysics, it does. I get to dictate all those things.
I mean,
You
if I
said your
think
identity is constantly changing?
No, heaven. Once I die, heaven will be constantly changing.
Oh.
One day it's going to look like Vegas, next day it's going to be the forest, next day it's going to be the desert, shit like that. Host Mark is attempting to deny me my ability to dictate how the afterlife will be. And I'm saying, see, that's one of the advantages of my tricks, not Host Mark. I'm able to do that. I'm able to decide what heaven will be. And a lot of people don't get to do that. They don't get that choice. So, you're missing out.
Francis Schaeffer came up with a pretty good analogy for that. It's like there's a woman tied up on a railroad track. This is a play of some sort. There's a woman tied up on a railroad track. A train's coming to go run her over. The audience sees that a hero is coming, and so everything's okay. And then all of a sudden they take the hero away. The train's still coming. She's tied up on a railroad track, and she comes up in her mind that a hero is coming, but really no hero is coming at all. And she gets run over.
Well, a couple problems with that analogy. First of all, if I were tied up on a train track, that's not the time for magical thinking. That's the time for practical thinking. And number two, I'm not looking for a hero. I am the hero. I'm telling the universe what the heavens are going to be. I'm not going to just accept some external party's dictations to me about it. I will dictate that to him.
Right, and I think that's a faulty view. It doesn't work like that.
Why not? How do you know? You haven't died.
Tied up on a railroad.
You
Even
haven't
worse than
died.
that.
How do you know?
How do I know? We can logically go over it. I mean, I don't think it's a non-rational or irrational conclusion.
Why is it less likely to work the way I say than any other way? At least I'm taking control of the situation. At least I'm making it happen that way.
There's only one way that it works.
Why?
Because there's only one way a lot of things work. Most things work. Almost all things work. I don't know.
Including heaven.
Maybe using
Including heaven. Are you sure about heaven, though?
Yeah. No, I am.
You sure that it only works one way?
It only works one way.
What if it's the way I'm saying?
Well, you have to prove that.
Well, I already have. For myself, for my own purposes. You're the one who's denying that I get to dictate my own heaven. I didn't say I get to dictate your heaven.
Well, there's only one heaven. There's only one for both of us.
Well,
If the answer's outside of us, it's not inside of us.
Well, the point is this, mister. I know there's only one heaven for you because you're not telling God what heaven's going to be like I am. But if you master the art of time magic, then you get to dictate the narrative. And that's how it's going to be.
Why would he listen to you?
Well, after all, I'm the one with the metaphysics. His existence relies on my metaphysics.
Your metaphysics relies on his existence.
No. He only exists insofar as I'm invoking him.
Oh, I disagree.
Well, I mean, he doesn't exist functionally for me when I'm not invoking him. He's not present in my consciousness or in my subconscious. He's not influencing my decisions.
Yeah, he is.
How do you know? Have you been there? In my subconscious?
No, but I've been told about it.
It's
So,
a messy
I mean, that's
place.
sufficient.
There's no room for gods in there. It's mostly a bunch of people rocking back and forth. Yeah, God, I make room for God when I need him, right? My God, number one, would really rather not be bothered most of the time because generally he doesn't do anything for anybody. You got to be a time wizard to get him to do shit. And number two, you know, he knows his place.
Yeah, he knows yours too.
Well, he knows my deal, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, I mean, here's the thing. We want to talk a lot about God. And everybody wants to say what God does and what God's like. And what God's not and what God is. Or if God exists or all that kind of stuff. What I'm saying is, my God is a God that deals with me like a cool person would. Not like some deity, alright? Which he understands, I'm the one who's going to have to stay in this fucking heaven for all of eternity, so naturally I should dictate what it's going to be. And he understands that if I'm not sitting there invoking him during the course of the day, then he doesn't have any access to my head. He doesn't get to go in there. Now, he also knows that I've got some promises I have, or one promise I have to keep, right? And then if I don't keep that, then he will strike me down. But other than that, I get to decide what my God is, and the reason he has that promise deal is because I decided that too. That's why he has that deal. That's why he can strike me down, because I gave him that power.
Your conclusions are the natural result of starting with, this feels better, this helps me out, and I'm just going to go from there, rather than going to the beginning and trying to figure it out.
Well, I think you misunderstand the purpose of gods then. The purpose of gods is to be a tool in your metaphysics to enable you to better achieve outcomes that are capable through magical thinking that aren't necessarily capable through rational thinking. Sometimes you got to...
It doesn't exist.
Well, of course it is. Of course it is, because, you see, we're all encumbered by the capacity to overthink things. We're all encumbered by it. Now, some of us are encumbered by it to the extent that we don't get shit done. Some of us are encumbered by it to the extent that we can't make wise decisions. And both of those genuine human frailties are addressed through this magical thinking trick. So why would we not embrace it logically?
Why do you call it magical thinking?
Well, because it's non-rational.
Why is it non-rational?
Because it permits you to draw conclusions regarding meaning things after the fact, such that you can't falsify any of them.
You can't falsify what exactly?
You can't falsify the conclusions. You can't falsify the conclusions that you've drawn about the meaning to be taken from any given set of circumstances.
Why not?
Well, because it's non-rational. So, in other words, if in fact an apparent one set of meaning that I generate turns out to be contraindicated by facts, well, then I don't really have to resolve it because it's magical thinking. I can just toss it and just beg the question and throw something else in there. The point is that it's the behavior; it's not a belief. I'm not ascribing to beliefs based on this warrant. I'm engaging in behavior to produce courses of action that I can pursue, and I utilize the framework to cause action to be more likely and to be more wise, because I'm trying to remove some of the natural human tendency to overthink things.
I mean, that's just a circular argument. But, I mean, yeah.
It's not an argument. Once again, it's a behavior, a trick.
Well, I mean, if you're going to say that God exists,
I'm not saying that. I didn't say that. That's my whole point, is that you can both engage in magical thinking, faith-based behavior, and also not believe that God exists. That's what I'm telling you. It's a behavior, not a belief. We're talking God, Sailor. You're anti-God. You can join not host Mark in trying to break down my magical thinking trick. If you'd like.
I think you make a ton of sense.
Right. Well, yeah, thank you.
Naturally, I would.
It is practical.
It is.
But I mean, I understand your objection to it. If it were an argument, not host Mark, you'd be right. It would be circular. And if I were trying to say, no, guys, you should believe me that this is what we should do because God told me, then that would not be an adequate warrant to convince anybody. But I don't ever make those justifications when I'm talking to other people because that's not the time for magical thinking.
Right, I mean, but I would say that it is rational and you can't explain it.
If I can't explain it and you can't explain it, then how is it rational?
Well, I can explain it. I don't think you can.
How do you explain it?
What God's existence? You have to start there.
No. So what do you think is what are you saying is rational or not rational?
I'm saying that God's rational, and Him existing outside of you objectively is rational, and Him influencing you.
Okay, let me hear your proof.
Is rational, whether you invoke Him to enter your head or not.
Let me hear your reasoning. Let me hear your reasoning.
Okay. So there's only a certain number of ways that the Earth could come into existence, the universe could come into existence. There's very few answers that anyone's ever given. You have an illusion. Everything's fake and doesn't really exist. But then you have to answer the question of where that illusion came from. Who's creating the illusion? You can say that it came from chance, but if I was in a vacuum and I was flipping a quarter, and I was using the same force, the same height, same leverage, no wind or anything, I could make it land on heads every single time. So chance isn't a thing. It's just something that a term that we came up with to explain a probability that we don't know. You could say that the universe created itself, but that goes against the law of causality. So that doesn't work. It can't be both the cause and the effect in the same time in the same place.
But then obviously that same rule applies to whatever God you're trying to describe as the first cause. What caused that God? I mean, your causality argument breaks down immediately. Those aren't strong arguments.
No, you're misinterpreting the law of causality. I can have the cause. It doesn't need to be an effect. You have Aristotle with the unmoved mover. It's not illogical. You could have a universe that has always existed, and that's logical. You can ascribe to that. There's nothing illogical about there being an eternal something.
What's illogical would be to think that we even know all the options of how something could come into existence.
What's illogical, not host Mark, is the application of the law of causality to everything but God. That's what's illogical. It's not the fact that
it can be the universe itself.
What?
It can be the universe itself. The universe could have always existed eternally. That's logical too.
Okay, but that's inconsistent with your causality argument.
No, the law of causality, a thing cannot be the cause and the effect.
Oh, okay, fine. Yeah, fine. Well, that's actually the law of non-contradiction, isn't it? Or maybe you're right. Okay, law of non-contradiction is two things can't exist both in the same time, space, and aspect concurrently. Okay, so fine. Something can't be both the cause and effect. Does everything have to have a cause? Not according to you, right?
Right.
Okay, fine. That doesn't prove anything other than, I mean, that you've got an answer that's as good as any other.
Well, you come down to two answers. You either say that the universe is eternal or God created it.
But, I mean, the thing is, we know that most things of note are emergent. That is to say, they're sort of causally irreducible. That systems, including probably consciousness itself, is an emergent function of this thing we're doing right now. Basically, it's an emergent function of the capacity to communicate, or of grammar, or of something. Anyway, the point is, there's no reason, first of all, to prefer the fact that it always existed to the fact that God created it. That in fact, if you consider it infinitely fractal in all directions, then it would be more logical that it always existed. Second of all,
Okay.
this existence that we're experiencing right now would be more likely if we were going to pick a single theory that's most likely. It would be simulation theory, which says we indisputably know that we get increasingly sophisticated simulations, and that eventually we'll get to be able to simulate existence itself so perfectly that it'll be indistinguishable from what we're doing right now. So
Right,
if that's the case,
illusion.
if that's the case, then the likelihood of us being the quote unquote base reality is very slim. So
It doesn't matter.
yeah, you're going to say, well, but still we have to the question of who created the base reality. Well, I wonder if that's actually true, because you see, God, for all intents and purposes, for us, needn't be anything more than a player of a simulation who's sufficiently advanced from us as to be considered godlike. If in fact there is a player out there that's playing my character and that's maneuvering shit to make it easier for me or something, I don't know. If that were the case, then that player would be indistinguishable from God to me, and there'd be no reason to think he's anything other than God. Did he create the universe? I don't know, but he's behaving as a creator would. He's displaying omniscience and omnipotence.
You're just going further on down the line. You just go back further. I mean, you're just making the line longer. That's all you're doing.
But see, I'm not. I question the validity of asking questions outside of our own reality. To saying, well, if I can presume that this reality might be a simulation, then I'm entitled to ask questions about the reality outside of the simulation. But of course, we have zero capacity to know anything about that reality outside of the simulation. So there's no reason to imagine that any questions we might ask about it would be remotely close to anything like true, right? Because this reality could be entirely different than
being illogical. Like if you're going to default to an illogical argument, that's fine. I'll accept that.
That's not an illogical argument. What's illogical about it?
Well, you're gonna say that, well, outside this universe there's no logic and logic doesn't apply. Well, in that case, okay. Sure.
What I'm saying is, outside this reality, an unobserved reality is axiomatically impossible, right? We understand that, yes? Unobserved reality is impossible. If we're going to talk about something that's outside of this reality, we're imagining it being observed by whom? A human?
No.
By whom? How do we know about it?
How do we know about it? We can determine what it started from with logic.
So we observe it, or what? We observe it deductively?
Yeah, we part of logic is understanding that your base senses are somewhat reliable. Not completely reliable.
The only
But
deductive truth.
if you don't agree with that, then it's not a logical argument.
The only deductive truth that we can logically deduce from simulation theory, if we are in a reality simulation, is, in fact, that we cannot deduce anything logically about what outside that simulation might be.
Right.
That's the only logical conclusion we can draw. So what you want to say is, well, let's ask questions about something that it's logically impossible for us to know anything about.
Yeah, and I'm saying that you're defaulting to an illogical argument, and I'm saying okay.
Okay, but listen, you keep calling this an illogical argument. You and I are in direct contradiction with each other here. I'm saying no. What you are claiming is logically impossible. What I am claiming is logically sound. That's what I'm saying. So explain to me why you say my argument's illogical.
I just that it is logically possible, and you're coming up with, out of left field somewhere, this conclusion that it's an illusion.
Hold on. I just gave you an example of why another possibility you hadn't. You said, okay, illusion or always existed or whatever, right? Now, I didn't just say illusion from what you said. Well, it was illusion. What was causing the illusion? I gave you a perfectly reasonable and, in fact, logically sound and even highly probable in some sense analysis of what our current reality is. And then you said you still have to ask those metaphysical questions. But I pointed out that you'd be asking it about a reality outside of the only reality you can possibly know. And so you'd be asking questions about something that's logically impossible for you to know. Now, who is making the logical or who is making the illogical argument here? My warrant's clear.
you are saying that we should abandon logic.
No, I'm saying
the
that to
logical
know
conclusion
about something that is not within a knowable reality is logically impossible. That is definitionally impossible.
Right. So you're going through a logical process to get to the point where you can say, I'm going to abandon this. That's
No,
okay.
I'm saying that your position regarding God is less likely to be true than my position regarding a simulation theory, and that if my position regarding a simulation theory is accurate, that your insistence that you can still make metaphysical claims about the base reality is in fact definitionally impossible. That's what I'm telling you.
Well, let's go on to a different argument then. If it is an illusion.
Who was being illogical, though? We haven't resolved that point. You said I was being illogical. I pointed out that no, in fact, it's you.
A point that's not going to be resolved.
But it is, though, because you haven't answered my point, and yet your claim's still sitting on the table that I was being illogical. What's your answer to it?
Your point, you're saying that it is more probable that we are in some sort of illusion, which outside of is creating us. So you have to determine how out of something illogical comes something logical. You have to determine that, and you have to prove that. I don't know how that...
Hold on. I gave you my warrant for why simulation theory is more likely. You haven't answered that either. My warrant is we know that sapiens creates simulations. We know simulations get increasingly advanced, and we can extrapolate out and conclude that simulations will eventually be sufficiently advanced to simulate reality. Now that's a more practical explanation, a more real explanation than anything you've given me, and you haven't answered it.
All right. Well, hold on a minute. Can we get to the point when we're so technologically advanced that we can create a simulation that defies our own logic?
Well, I don't think it would be logic at that point. It would be knowing observation. Yeah. If you were to put a baby in it or something, they had no way of knowing they were in a simulation from the get-go.
But it would still be affected by our rules of logic. We couldn't get out of that.
Okay, but what I'm saying, I guess I misunderstood the question. Would that simulation still be subject to our rules of logic? Could be. Not necessarily.
It would have to be. Well, I would say necessarily.
I mean, it's subject to conditionality, right? But conditionality, like you pointed out earlier, is not causality. And conditionality allows us to play with the nature of a reality substantially more than causality does, because it's a time function rather than a space function. Okay, so what other points do we have about this sort of stuff, metaphysical stuff?
Well, if the universe has eternally existed, if we are to function, as you say, for purpose, how would a court system work if there weren't universal truths?
I think there are universal truths.
If I'm going to court because I murdered somebody, and the judge says, you murdered somebody, you're going to get the death penalty. I say, well, no, I like murdering people. Murdering people's a good thing. How does that get resolved?
Well, I mean, you're preaching to the choir here. I'm an absolutist. It gets resolved for the simple issue as for the logically deduced moral prohibition on murder that comes from the fact that you were born owning your own body.
Where did the universal truth?
Because it's logically deduced from the fact that you're born owning your own body, and you've yet to dispute that claim. You've not given me any alternative, huh?
It's not absolute. It's not absolute. It's contingent upon us being born.
Correct. It's true. You have to be a moral agent to be subject to the laws of moral agency. That's true.
It's not absolute. It's contingent.
Well, okay. It's absolute for moral agents, which is the only people who are capable of moral agency. So yeah, it's absolute. Now, if you want to say, but you're not ascribing to morality for rocks, Eric. Well, you're right. I'm not ascribing to morality for rocks.
Yeah, but you are saying that you're the only personal agent, or humanity's the only personal agent.
I'm saying that to be subject to moral law, you have to be a moral agent. Yeah, obviously. I mean, right?
Well, God's a moral agent.
You see, you're begging the question.
How am I begging the question?
I'm saying you don't need God to have absolute morality, and you're saying, in response to that, well, God's a moral agent. Well, that's assuming you're begging the question. You see what I'm saying? It's like the point we're trying to argue here is whether or not you need God for morality. You can't use as one of your positions that God is a moral agent.
In your view, absolute morality does not exist. You might say that it does, but it really doesn't. It's contingent upon being born. It's contingent upon thinking that.
No, it's contingent upon their existing moral agents. That's true, and obviously true, and definitionally true. You can't then just throw in the fact that there's also God and make that and think you've made any progress in the argument. You're just begging the question.
I'm not saying in my position it makes sense, because God would be the one that creates these absolute morals.
Yeah, I know that's where you're going. I know that's where you're going with it. I'm telling you, you don't need to go there. That's not where morality comes from. You don't have to have it come from there. You could if you wanted to.
But you can have relative truth, sure.
No, you can have absolute truth that doesn't come from God, because, unfortunately, the reason you think you can't is because you misunderstand the nature of a moral agent. A moral agent is that which has the capacity to engage in moral agency. That which does not have the capacity to engage in moral agency obviously cannot. To be engaged in moral agency means to have been born. It's definitionally so. It's saying, well, because Eric, you were able to define a pound as heavier than an ounce, therefore God. No. That's not the case.
Who defines what? I guess whatever you just said. Who defines that morality comes from being born, or morality comes from this? Who defines that? Who says that absolutely?
It's not a person. You see, truths don't come from authority figures. Truths come from situationally necessary realities. Like, for example, the alternative to us being born owning our own bodies and having rights is that it's sometimes okay to smother newborn babies because they're crying too loud. That's the alternative. So you have to choose between those alternatives. You want to say, well, you're making a claim that's not based on anything. I'm saying I'm making a claim of fundamental superiority to any other claim, right? So it's fundamentally superior to any other claim makes it absolutely true. It's non-varying. There's no exceptions. Every human being has these rights, and every human being is born with ownership of their own body. That ownership can be plundered from them. It can be plundered by bad people. That doesn't mean they aren't born owning it, and it doesn't mean that's not where morals come from. It's reciprocal burdens. To be a moral agent means to note and to be aware of the fact that other moral agents need also to engage in the world with you.
Why does everybody get that absolute morality, quote unquote? Why isn't it just you?
Like I said, it follows logically from the fact you're born owning your own body.
Yeah, you are.
So are you.
Okay,
Everybody is. Everybody is. Because the alternative is what? Remember, you don't get to have an alternative of nothing.
I mean, you have to establish that life is worth something. I mean, you have to establish a whole bunch of things.
You're back to playing nibs with me, homie. You're playing nibs.
Yeah,
necessary but insufficient burdens are the last resort of the person who's getting his ass whipped. You cannot just assign to me reasons, things, extra shit I got to establish before I make my point. No, I've established everything I need to establish before I make my point. You haven't answered any of it.
I haven't answered any of it. I'm saying that you're a relativist.
I'm disagreeing with you. And my points are standing and yours aren't. That's the whole point I'm making here. Is that you're making a claim that I'm disagreeing with. I'm saying I'm right because XYZ. You're saying I'm right because ABC. I'm saying not ABC. And then you're saying I'm right because I don't know. And I'm saying, but XYZ means you're wrong. And you're going, nah, but I'm still right. That's what's happening here.
No, I don't even know what you're talking about. I mean, who says that life is worth something? That your whole claim is based on that. Why is life worth it?
Because again, you're pretending as though there's a default alternative of zero. But if life is not worth anything, look, the fact is, if our alternative to a human-based morality is abject suffering and nihilism and zero reciprocal burdens and zero caring for each other.
It's absolutely not.
Yeah, it is.
No, I mean, you can either have that, or you can have a personal infinite God that creates these morals, which makes logical sense. This is the, if you want to talk about an idea of being better than the other one, that's the only reason why you should agree with it. I mean, that's the logical one. That's the only one that works.
But then I can't trust your morals. Then I can't trust your morals. Because look, unlike personal life stuff, like I was saying, that kind of magical thinking, that's about how I can make my life better. Morals are about how we all agree that we must treat other people. I can't trust yours if they come from God. Because there's lots of people disagree about that. No, mine are logically sound because they don't rely on God to justify the moral claims they make. And so I don't have to run into the problem that you have. Well, what if you're somebody's Muslim? Am I subject to your Christian morality? Am I subject to your universalist morality?
Yes.
Well, okay, but they don't agree with that. You don't have a reason to make them agree, except their book's just as strong as yours. Your Bible's just as strong as their fucking Quran. Those things just cancel each other out.
It's not.
They just go. They're
Absolutely
just.
Not.
I mean, dude.
No.
But neither of them is an actual piece of evidence in any sort of argument, right? You can't utilize that as a reason to prefer your morality over somebody else's because not everybody agrees on that, and even if they did, there wouldn't be anything falsifiable about it. Remember how come I don't apply magical thinking to other people? It's because it's non-falsifiable. Same reason why you can't use this to ascribe morality without fundamentally saying my morals are arbitrary and I'm going to apply them to everybody else because I like my religion.
Well, my religion happened on Earth, and it happened in history, and it happened in time, and it happened with people. And you can go through the resurrection. You can go to the ultimate, realization that yes, he actually rose from the dead, and that's a logical explanation.
Let's say he did. Okay, I'm not even disputing any of that. I'm not disputing any of that. What I'm saying is, even if all that is true, even if you have the one true spiritual path, we can't use it for public policy. We can't. You know why?
Yeah. Yes, you can.
No, you can't.
Why?
Well, because different Christians have different interpretations of the Bible, and a lot of people aren't Christians. And the Bible prescribes for certain things that aren't crimes. It prescribes against certain things that aren't crimes. They aren't crimes against other people. They don't violate rights.
What about crimes about other people? What?
Look, you can't have a morality system that says things are morally impermissible unless they harm other individual human beings. Otherwise, you interfere with free will. Moral agency doesn't run afoul of free will.
If you're saying that all of that happened and you're granting me that, then you should listen to that guy. Because that guy has an ultimate absolute God that created everything.
I don't see any reason why rising from the dead gives you better wisdom about morality than me. In fact, I can tell you, ascribing to the wisdom of this individual has not done you any favors because you failed to understand that you own your own body even. So, I mean, they're leading you astray, not towards the truth.
First chapter Genesis, I'm told that.
Okay, so you're told in Genesis you own your own body. So then why would you conclude that your morality has to follow from anything other than that? It can follow logically from that and be adequately prescribed and be something we can all agree on based on reciprocal burdens. Reciprocal burdens.
The only reason I know that is because I'm told that.
Okay, well, that's why you can't use it for public policy. I mean, that's why you can't.
That's why you have to.
You can admit that
Look at what's happening in society.
you should admit that Christianity is not logical without being blasphemous. That's the whole purpose of faith. If you admit that you're believing in something without solid basis to believe in it, that's what faith is. So you don't need to approach this like
a new definition.
From your son is the absolute only way. Don't treat that like that's blasphemy, because that's kind of the impression I'm getting.
Look.
Well, that's the new definition of faith. That's not the original definition.
Here, I'm a person of faith. I practice it, I explained to you, and I define faith specifically as behaving as though something were true in the absence of evidence that it is true or in the face of contrary evidence. That's the very definition of faith. But okay, see, you're mistaking faith again. Faith is a behavior you engage in for short periods of time to accomplish goals. It is not. You think that there's objects in the world called God and that it's like some thing out there. That's not how it works at all. You create God, and you make God be the God you need him to be, and you have him direct things as you need him to direct things. Don't subsume yourself beneath God. That's identity defeating. You want to be self-aggrandizing, not self-defeating.
Oh no, glory to him, man. Like I'm nothing compared to him. That's the way it works.
He's mad at you right now. He's mad at you. He's frustrated.
No,
I know, dude. I know. It's frustrating to me too. Only individualism is the way to manifest divinity. Okay, individualism.
Well, what you just did is the basis of relativism. What you just said, like
no, it's not. You are completely fucking wrong. Individuals with rights, natural rights, and property, they constrict human behavior such that it is in fact moral. Do you understand that if you actually apply this negative rights framework equally, that the rights never conflict with each other? That it's a prohibition on transgression. That it would uphold much of your Christian worldview. But it wouldn't uphold it all. But the good news is, unlike your Christian worldview, it passes the reciprocal burdens test. We all can agree to apply it to ourselves, and we all can agree that everybody else should be required to apply it to themselves. Because it's a simple rule. It says, you can't be the aggressor. You can't use violence first. It has to be responsive. Now that rule allows us a concrete metaphysics. It gives us a concrete set of moral prohibitions, things that are morally prohibited, things that are morally permissible, things that are morally, obligatory. So now, depending on the negative rights framework, doesn't obligate you to do much. It obligates you to not do certain things. But the point is, it is sound. It does solve all for. It does work universally. And again, most importantly, I can't ask somebody of a different religion to ascribe to your religion's morality without failing the reciprocal burdens test, because you're not going to ascribe to theirs.
Because they're wrong. I'm not gonna ascribe that the sky is red because the other guy is. No, it's not
but
red.
neither of you are going to disagree with the negative rights framework, which says you have rights and you must respect the rights of others. See, neither of you has to disagree with that because it doesn't conflict with your religion.
Constitution, man, that's based on scripture, like that. It is.
Okay, but even if it is, do you understand that there are a lot of people in the country right now who are citizens of this nation who do not ascribe their morality to that source, whether it was historically ascribed to that or not?
I kill you if I disagreed with you, but I'm not. I'm a Christian, so I'm not going to kill you. Yeah, I mean, there's ways that you can coexist with one another.
But your fundamental position is that still it's a good idea to advocate in favor of a religious-based approach to legislation.
Absolutely.
Do you?
What denomination are you?
Go back to the court system. Go back to the court system. I come in and I like murdering people, and I think murdering people is good. You're the judge, and you say I'm condemned, and I say why?
Because you violated that individual's rights. You have a duty not to interfere with him, and you made the worst possible interference. You not only plundered him, like made him a slave, you destroyed the only property that enables him to continue to take any sort of action at all. So thus, according to any reasonable secular moral framework, you are going to prison or having even potentially the death penalty, although I oppose it personally.
My morality says I should do those things. I should take that guy's life.
What denomination are you?
I don't ascribe to a denomination. I mean, Scripture tells us not to do that anyway.
Okay, well...
What version of the Bible do you read?
I read a whole bunch of translations. Right now, I normally use the New King James Bible. But.
So, how did you funnel down to the New King James Version? If you're not denominational.
How did I funnel down to it? I mean, I'll read the NIV. I mean, I have the New English translation. I like reading different translations of the same book over and over and over again. I think that helps a lot. You get, different.
Better translation. That's a divine translation.
What do you mean by divine translation?
You believe that there is a version of the Bible in English that was divinely translated perfectly by God.
No.
So you're basing all this off imperfect translation.
It's divinely inspired. That doesn't mean it's the exact word or anything like that. It's inspired. God's inspired word.
Some messages are lost in translation, and you're still advocating as strongly as you are your beliefs.
I mean, lots
Could
of
you repeat
things.
that?
My position is inspired by God as well. Remember, God helped me quit drinking.
We're back in court, and I said that. What do you say?
I didn't hear you.
That most people think this is the truth, and therefore you should listen to most people. Is that that's what you're going to say?
No, I'm saying for someone who doesn't think he's even reading the exact words of God, you're awfully convinced. I'm trying to figure out where your beliefs come from, because it's not any version of the Bible that I can tell, just kind of a hodgepodge, and it's not any denomination I can tell. So what do you believe? Where do your beliefs come from? Or are they completely self-manifested?
No, they're not self-manifested. I mean, I came part way, God came part way. That's just the way it works. But I mean, okay. So back to the court thing. You're going to say that most people think this way, so you should be punished. And I say, why? Who says that the majority should rule?
Nobody said that argument, Mark. The actual
the
actual argument that was made was the reason that person has to be put in jail is because they violated the other person's natural right and negative right. They aggressed against them, and as per the natural rights and negative rights framework, that's both immoral and subject to responsive violence as a punishment.
And who is upholding the negative rights framework?
All of us, every day when we don't aggress upon one another.
The fact that it exists
So
as
most
an
people.
point right now outside of God upholds itself.
So you're saying most people ascribe to this. Therefore, you should
No,
ascribe to
most
this.
people don't ascribe to it. That's not what I'm saying. I would say most people do not ascribe to the negative rights framework, at least not in a meaningful, effective, knowledgeable sense. I'm saying that it's the best framework. It's the only logically defensible one. And unlike yours, it doesn't require you just call upon the same religious text. Now, you might make ample claims that religious text is true, but the fact is, you're going to have lots of people, even if you convince me, you're going to have a huge majority of the people in the country who not only disagree with you, but see your insistence on running the country according to that as a violation of respect for their rights of conscience, of their rights to think and believe as they see fit. Now, the problem is we need a system, we need an actual moral system that doesn't require individuals to convert to a different religion before they get it right. So, fortunately, we have one, and it's the one I'm telling you about.
I mean, so you still haven't answered the question.
What's the
Why
question?
am I condemned?
I told you.
Why am I condemned?
You violated their rights. Remember? Plunder? Property rights?
Yeah, but my morality just says I didn't.
Yeah, but see, that's why my universal morality makes sense, because it apply. Why is it universal? There's a good reason, okay? Remember this. It's not arbitrary. It's not arbitrary like yours. There's a good reason why it's universal. It's because it passes the reciprocal burdens test, okay? So, because of that,
Created the reciprocal burdens test.
it says things like, if you get to argue that ducks are geese because they both have the letter S in them, then I get to argue that spoons are trees because they both have the letter S in them. Right? We both get to make the same line of argumentation. It's called reciprocal burdens. So in other words, if in fact you're going to make the moral claim that I have to follow the morality of your religion to get it right, then you must be subject to the reciprocal burden, which is you have to follow my religion. Because here's why it's not the same thing as being right or wrong, right? Because it's necessarily metaphysical, and if you are in fact sure, if you have proved in fact God's existence to yourself, then you are not a person of faith any longer. Okay, so you're a scientist now. You're a scientist who's scientifically proving God.
Well,
So
that's a whole other thing. Science and religion were the same thing. They coexisted together.
and then
Francis Bacon was a Christian guy that invented the scientific method.
and then the scientists figured it out.
Because of Christianity. The only reason science exists in the modern form is because of Christianity.
Okay, fine. Okay, let's can see all of that shit. You haven't answered my point, right? Have you? Why should somebody who has a different religion, are you claiming that your religion is factually more true enough, right? That in fact, these are the sort of things you can compare against each other and say, this one is factually true and that one is factually not true, and it doesn't actually require any faith. Is that what you're saying? That your religion requires no faith?
Yeah, it's rational.
Okay, then it's not a metaphysics if it's entirely rational, right? You've got to have some manner of claim, and you want to minimize it as much as possible. For example, my claim, as you jumped right on it. You jumped right on it. You jumped right on it, Mark. You jumped on it left and right. You stomped on it. Which is what? That you were born owning your own body. That's my initial claim. Your initial claim is vastly, immensely, universally less defensible than my claim. Unavoidably true. You can't defend it as well because it's a much bigger claim. So, I mean, that's the conundrum you're in right here. And it's not only is it a bigger claim, but it's a claim about God, for goodness sakes. And, half the world's population believes in a totally different God.
And they're wrong.
Okay, but you can't prove that. You can't falsify their religions.
Yes, I can.
Then I can falsify yours. Yours is just as falsifiable as theirs.
All right, go for it.
Well, I want to hear you falsify first. I'm going to use reciprocal burdens on you. Whatever method you use to falsify theirs, I'll falsify yours with the same method. So you don't try to pull some bullshit squirrely get out of it argument.
All other religions are based upon works that you do. So you never know if you're truly saved or not. You never know if it works. You never know if you're right with God or not. Muslims, the only way that you truly know is if you kill somebody. So there's that.
Repentance and belief is a work. Next.
It's not a work.
Yeah, it is. You have to do
Accepting
something.
Jesus as Savior is not a work.
That is an act that you have to do in order to get saved. Next.
Okay, but listen, here, Mark, regardless of that, he's right, of course, but the point is, even if you are correct that they are all about works and this is all about belief, that doesn't prove you're right, it just proves you're different.
Yeah, it proves I'm different. Yeah, exactly.
That's not the same thing as correct.
The one that's true is going to be different from all the rest of them. The Buddhists, the Eastern philosophers.
So if I can show you similarities between Christianity and another religion, have I disproved your thesis?
I knew you threw me an alley-oop and I missed it.
If you're going to go down to an infinite personal God, you have three options. You have Judaism, you have Christianity, and you have Islam.
I got a shitload more options. I got a whole fucking pantheon of gods. I got Anthropocentrism, God of Temples of Confusion, Curtis, God of Naming and the Text things. I've got High Lord Alienator.
They represent things.
Yeah, gods.
Impersonal. They don't have personality.
God represents Dad.
They don't have personality.
Who? Gods?
The King Spaghetti Monster has more personality.
Hindu gods. They're not personal.
Okay, but look, all of these reasons you're giving don't falsify the religion, and they don't.
The resurrection proves Christianity.
Okay.
The resurrection proves Christianity.
All right, fine. Let's say the resurrection would prove Christianity, and somebody was raised from the dead. Okay, let's just pretend that we were reasonably convinced of that. To me, being raised from the dead doesn't entitle you to all these other metaphysical claims. Just because, what if Taylor were to die today, and tomorrow, it was like, well, I'm okay after all. Would you make him your God?
Yeah, if he said in 3 days I'm going to rise again, and he rose again, yeah, you wouldn't be. He's not God per se. He's a man.
How hard would you try to? How hard would you test it for tricks? Would you test it for tricks at all? Are you subject to anybody who comes around and fools you? Or you're sure? Would you test it for tricks or not? You take his word for it?
Oh yeah, I'd look top and bottom for other explanations. Sure.
So did you test it for tricks back then, when it happened? No, you weren't alive yet. Okay. So how then do you know there weren't any tricks?
you can read Richard Dawkins, you can read all the atheist writers, and their explanations for everything. There's people that have come up with a whole myriad of.
I'm not an atheist, and I'm not citing Richard Dawkins or any other atheist writers. I'm asking you a simple question. You just told me that you would feel the need to double check it yourself to make sure there's no tricks going on, because it sounds like kind of a bullshit claim, but you haven't done it, and yet you believe it anyway.
No, I've read them. I'm telling you, I have.
That's not the same thing.
It was by gods.
I haven't. I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. I don't know. I haven't read those books. I hate that shit. I hate atheist shit. I'm not making atheist arguments. I'm pointing out that your methodology as a public policy directing methodology fails on every single possible test. Okay? I'm not saying you shouldn't have faith. I'm not saying you shouldn't believe in God. I'm not saying you shouldn't like God. I'm not saying you shouldn't carry God around in your fucking pocket. What I am saying is, if you're trying to tell me that this is a good way to decide public policy, you're fucking crazy.
Well, I guess I'm crazy then.
Why didn't Jesus do this policy thing that you're talking about?
He said, "Do what Rome says," didn't he?
He told us how governments should function. It outlines it in Scripture, like it's in there.
Why didn't he set up this system? If faith is not required, as I define it, only science, and if everything's supposed to be set up, the government's according to Christianity, why are we even having this conversation? I think right now Jesus is pretty pissed off that you're making him so impotent.
Me?
No. The Christian.
Oh,
is your question? Why
God's mad because we're making God impotent? Is that what you're saying?
God wants all this stuff if it's that fucking obvious, and faith is not required, our free will is not required. When he came here and he died and he didn't do his freaking job.
Free will is a thing.
Okay, so then if free will is a thing, why did they keep interfering back in the olden days before God went away and stopped interfering?
You didn't just go away and stop interfering. It's a spiritual battle. The whole Bible is a spiritual battle between God and Satan. They're interacting in the world all the time.
Okay, but
why does that influence free will at all? I don't understand what the connection is.
Well, let's say, remember my magical thinking example? Let's say that I choose for my magical thinking to go to Sizzler instead of Denny's, because I'm convinced God wants me to go to Sizzler, right? Well, let's say God did want me to go to Sizzler and gave me a hint, and I did it. Well, then that wasn't my free will. That was God's will. And my free will said, go to the other place. So now all of a sudden, how much free will do I really have? Is God's supposed to let me figure this out and try to... God has tasked me with determining moral agency with my mind, not with my emotions. He's tasked me with being a moral agent in real life. And he's tasked me with ensuring that people who advocate for stuff that's going to do great harm because it's non-universalizable, because it's non-falsifiable, because it's completely arbitrary as a mechanism, that they get their ass handed to them a little bit, because it's insane. You can't make that claim for other people. You can't say, you need to ascribe your morality to my religion. It's nuts.
God gave us all critical thinking to think that we're not supposed to use it.
You're saying my morality, your morality is the morality. There is no my and yours and this and that. It's there.
Well, my God is disagreeing with yours right now. He's saying, well,
right, and my God's above. My God's more powerful than yours, and my God.
No, my God's got like 6 shotguns. And they're they're like universe-sized shotguns, like boom! My God's a turtle. My God's a turtle too. He's got a shell. He's a turtle.
Yeah.
So
I
don't know how you're raised.
If I told you Sizzlers myself, that doesn't impact your free will not to go to Sizzlers. Just because he drops you a hint and he wants you to go to Sizzlers doesn't mean you don't have to go to Sizzlers, or you have to go to Sizzlers. there's still no impact there. There's no. So what?
Okay, so God doesn't ever actually interfere. He just drops hints. Or does he ever actually interfere? Does he ever cure anybody?
That was your scenario.
Oh, you're right, but now I'm expanding on it. See, you gave me your answer, which means your answer pins you down to something. So now I'm rolling off that answer and saying, okay, then if that's your reason, you see, because the reason you choose has to apply to more than one situation, right? It's got to be a reason why it has limits or something like that. So okay, explain it.
Explain what?
Whatever I just said. How you get more cheese out of your mom's face? I don't know. I mean, okay, but look, why would we prefer your divisive? Let's change the angle here a bit. We know that yours is divisive. Even you have to acknowledge that most people in the country are not going to favor a religious law governing the secular state. So we know yours is divisive, and we know the one I'm recommending actually prevents rights violations. Why should we prefer yours?
So you're asking why should we prefer mine? Because most people won't agree with it.
I'm saying
most people thought the sky was red. I still say
I'm pointing out that my alternative, even if yours is more true, that my alternative prevents rights violations. Now, to what extent does Christianity have anything to say about rights violations? Is it okay for me to stab you? According to Christianity? No, okay. Is it okay for me to insult you?
No.
It's not okay for me to insult you. Would you pass a law about that?
Well, define insult, because if people say insult is just me speaking the truth. Like
maybe?
Right,
is maybe?
That's an insult.
No, the Bible doesn't say that you should have a law that says don't insult people. That's not a thing.
So then, how about honoring your mother and father? Is that a law? You said the law would be directed by Christianity.
You and others.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that there needs to be a law on everything. There's free will, there's free agency,
well,
and you will
for
pay for your
goodness sakes, not host Mark, you're not very ascribing to your scripture, because it has the 10 Commandments in it, doesn't it? I mean, shouldn't you at least have the 10 Commandments, the laws of the Bible, and the law that you're basing on the Bible?
Written on our heart. Written on the heart. It doesn't got to be written on stone no more.
But okay, then how exactly are you imagining this heart-written Christian morality defining public policy?
How I see it defining public policy. I mean, the commandments should have something to do with it. The father and mother thing, mostly in the Jewish context, that deals with you when they're older in life, that you should monetarily help them, as you should monetarily help the poor, and you should monetarily help people in need.
So does the Bible say which of these things should be just sort of prescriptions and which should be actual laws with punishments? Does the Bible say which?
There's nowhere that says it doesn't need to be a law that you need to help your parents in their old age.
Does it need to be a not law? Or is it unclear on that point?
No, we have free agency to decide these things. He's given us a brain that is capable of distinguishing.
It's got ideas in the Bible, but you're not going to actually use it as a metric. You're saying I'm not going to actually use that as a metric, right? You're saying just because the Bible says you have to do something or should do something doesn't mean we should codify that into law.
It allows us to create culture. So he's okay with different cultures. Different cultures have different customs and different laws. He's okay with.
So yes or no? Are you saying that if the Bible says you have to do something, that in your understanding of a Bible-driven culture, that does not necessarily mean the government has to pass a law that is consistent with what the Bible says you should do?
There are certain laws that should be passed, yeah. Like don't murder people.
Okay, so it's basically arbitrary. You say I like the ideas of Christianity, but it's not really providing us guidance on public policy. Is that what you're saying?
No, there's laws in the Bible that say don't murder people.
Yes, but there's also laws that you want to be arbitrary about. You want to say, but not necessarily that one, not necessarily this one. But the Bible's not saying thou shalt not kill, and if you feel like it, thou shalt not dishonor their mother and parents.
It gives contingencies, like if a thief comes in the middle of the night to rob your house, then you have the right to kill him, because you don't know if he's going to kill you and your family. There's contingencies in the Bible, too, about certain things, like self-defense in that area.
But you're not committing to
I-
using the Bible as a metric to decide which laws we should pass. You're still saying we're going to be arbitrarily making that decision. The Bible's not providing us any actual firm guidance about it, because some of the things it says are going to apply, and some of the things it says we aren't going to apply based on our own secular human common sense. Correct?
It should not be secular. None of our decisions should be secular. Those are no.
Taylor,
God has
can you
given us
take over
free-
for a bit?
Again?
Let me stop
All right.
this, start another one.